2 o'clock. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Reopening Our Schools Safely panel. In just a moment, we'll hear from Superintendent Arntzen. Just a reminder, we are recording this for use later. Right now, we have cameras on for all of us that are serving as panelists and moderators. We may have members of the press joining us. Their cameras will not be on and they will not be asking additional questions, but we are all about transparency at the OPI, so the press is welcome to observe. Once the recording is done today, we will send it out to each of you. You're welcome to use it in your own networks as well, and we'll be using it at the OPI, both with internal staff and external partners of the legislature. Thank you for being here. Superintendent?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year. May this be a healthy new year for all of us. And in education, let's make sure that we put all the energy and effort into students learning wherever they're learning, however they're learning. Part of the discussion today on safely opening our Montana public schools, we would like to have reflections of you, reflections of you. And that's why this panel was created, so we could understand your thoughts, your feelings as we move forward. So with that, I am so honored that you're here with us and sharing those views with us. So with that, Sarah, please, let's continue.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to start out with some brief introductions. If each of you could explain who you are and whom you represent. Let's start with Superintendent Rasmussen.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to all you as well. I'm Renee Rasmussen. I'm a 15-year public school superintendent, currently serving the end of 9 years in Bainville, Montana. I'll be retiring at the end of this year. I have 30 years in education in Montana, not counting, of course, the 12 I went to school here.
Thank you. Principal Zahara Harris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shawnda Zahara Harris. I am the principal at Laurel High School. I've been in education for 26 years, 14 of that as an administrator from pre-K to 12. And I'm currently in my 5th year here in Laurel in the 9th through 12th grade high school.
Thank you. And our representative for the teaching profession is the 2020 Montana Teacher of the Year, Ms. Linda Ross.
Hello, I'm Linda Ross, and I teach at Baker High School in Baker, Montana. This is my 14th year teaching. I used to teach in Ekalaka for 7 years, and I've been teaching in Baker for 7 years. And I teach 10 through 12, biology and chemistry and science research. And I'm also getting my PhD right now, and I just got an adjunct position with Miles City Community College. So I'm excited about that new change this semester, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Representing Montana parents of public school kids, Mr. Mike Fosbender.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here. My name is Mike Fosbender. I'm from Helena, Montana. I've got 2 kids at my alma mater at Montana State. I have one at the new high school in East Helena. She's a sophomore, so she gets to be an upperclassman every year that she's in school. And then I've got 3. I have one that would have started kindergarten this year, but we kept her home and homeschooled her. So I kind of have a wide range of different aspects of what's been happening with us.
Welcome. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, representing Montana students is Ms. Abby Hutton from Conrad High School.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I am Abby Hutton. I am a 9th grade student at Conrad High School, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And you might see the photo of Tara Dempsey. Tara Dempsey works here at the OPI, and she's our tech support today. If you have any issues during the meeting or if something's not working, go ahead and shoot Tara a message and she'll help you out. Thanks for being here, Tara. So with that, let's get right into what it's going to take to safely reopen Montana schools. We'll start with Mr. Fosbender. What has been the biggest impact on your children with the learning models used due to COVID-19?
Well, last spring was big when they just shut everything down. My sophomore really struggled just with everything. She probably would have been a 4-year state long jump champion, but the season got canceled. So she took that rough. She took it hard not being able to see her kids. Her mental health was, we looked into getting her a counselor even, and everybody was using them. We couldn't find one. So we just tried to stay active with her. Her mom and I did. Aiden was a senior last year at Helena High, and of course, their track season also got canceled. His relay team probably would have been the state champ. We took that away from him. My daughter was in Bozeman. She actually transitioned pretty well. It was her first year. She was a sophomore, but she did pretty well with it. But it's been an impact on the kids, and the mental health aspect of it, I think, is the biggest part that is it's getting some lip service, but I don't know if it's really being focused on like it needs to be.
Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Ross, when you look back to the start of the pandemic and the school closures in March of 2020, what has struck you as the most important action by school districts in ensuring the well-being of the whole child?
I think I can look at this from different perspectives, but I think that social emotional learning and mental health was definitely the most important part of this. And one way for, at least for my students, to understand it better is to kind of understand the science behind it and why this is a dangerous virus and why we're doing all these things. So that seemed to really help. But I was expecting to see more training from my district on social emotional learning, or how students dealing with trauma, because for some students, this has been trauma, they're experiencing trauma, and we didn't get any training like that. And we do have a service called Charlie for mental health, but I don't know of very many students who have used it because I think it goes through insurance, so they still have to pay. So that's a barrier that is significant. I mean, I think there are other students that would take advantage of it. And I think also, we also have to acknowledge that this isn't normal, and like this whole situation isn't normal, and that we need to look at it differently. And our focus should be the mental well-being of our students. And we can do school too, and they can learn, but we really do need to like to give teachers permission to focus on that, because I think there's a lot placed on our shoulders that, you know, students weren't in school since March and now we have to catch them all up. And that's a lot of pressure, when what our students need right now is more the social emotional part, and they need those supports before we can do normal school, because it's not normal. So
Thank you for that. Mrs. Rasmussen, when you think about safely reopening schools, what decision did your board and you as superintendent make for the learning models your students would access in a COVID-19 era? Renee, I think you're on mute.
When we think about safely reopening, I guess that my first thing is I certainly hope that we don't have to deal with COVID forever. But regardless, one way or the other, we have to open. The lives of the students that we are charged with to educate, those lives are on the line. And I agree, not just their education, but their social, emotional, and mental well-being as well. I don't see how we can justify our existence or our paychecks if we're not providing that learning. One of the things that we talked about with my senior staff was just removing the stigma of staying at home when one is sick is a huge step in the right direction. And we ended celebrating students and employees that come to work and power through being sick. Often leaving others to be sick and creating, you know, a wave after wave. And toward that, I pledge to no longer encourage perfect attendance. Okay. I'm looking to science to tell us how to best combat the spread of COVID in our schools and to mitigate that as safely as possible, whether that's some sort of air filter or some sort of new technology that we don't even know about. I'm hopeful that schools will receive help in purchasing and installing those kinds of devices so everyone can feel comfortable about students and staff returning to work. I'm also hopeful that we've seen the benefits of smaller class sizes and smaller schools as a way to address learning needs of each student and to prevent the usual spread of colds and flus and other illnesses that routinely ravage our learning process and prevent teachers from having access to their whole class.
Hey, Sarah, you're muted.
Okay, Abby, when you look back at school closures, school reopenings to part-time school, part-time at home, and all those variables, I have two questions for you. What has been the biggest impact on your learning and why? And what would you like people to know about keeping children safe in schools today? And what is your #1 priority in this regard?
Alrighty. So probably the biggest impact on me from switching from in-person school to remote learning has just been the uncertainty of it all. It has really made it hard to learn. There's different expectations. For example, teachers don't give us much work when we're doing remote learning, and I'm kind of on my own, so it's harder for immediate response from my teachers. And also, I have noticed that my teachers struggle with the uncertainty, so they reduce the flexibility. Also, it has been hard to work in remote learning without high-speed internet. I live outside of Conrad, and so I don't have rural broadband. And I have to call in, so I can't see the screen. And one time a cell tower went down and I didn't have any way to tell my teachers and communicate with them. There's less socialization, obviously, and learning is still progressing. It's just hard. And for my, for keeping students safe, I really appreciate that schools have been so careful and that we're still learning. And I really appreciate that. And my #1 priority is to not get sick, but still don't not stop living. And I play volleyball and tennis, and that it's really important for me to have sports and exercise in my lifestyle. It helps my learning, it helps me as a whole. And in quarantine, it always takes a couple of days to get back on track. And teacher, like for example, my teachers reviewed the classroom rules in October and today too. So it's always a big transition, and there's always uncertainty for me and my teachers.
Thank you, Abby. Ms. Zahara Harris, what is the most difficult decision you have had to make concerning students and staff safely learning in your school?
I think for us, the most difficult decision was the days we had to close our school, which just recently happened right before Christmas. We had worked really hard as a collective group. Our board was extremely supportive in our attempts at in-person learning with a blended model for both our staff and for our students. We have several staff members who work as remote teachers, as well as remote students. And so we found a way to really make that work effectively through the entire fall, allowing kids to be involved in their normal activities, many of their normal routines. And when we faced an outbreak that caused us to have to close our doors for a week, that for myself personally and for my colleagues here at the high school was very, very difficult. However, that being said, the positive part of it that I felt happened for our staff, my apologies, I don't know how to mute my phone, was our teachers needed a break as well. They were exhausted by that point. They are doing a blended model. So they're teaching in-person kids while teaching online kids at the same time, which basically is double and triple planning for them. And that's been a hard part for me, is asking our teachers to do that much extra work. There are a lot of things that we put in place at the beginning of the year that helped us overcome some of those obstacles. But then there were other challenges and other obstacles that came into play with the online versions, policies related to using online modalities. Can we show kids? Can we show our special ed kids? How do we interact? There were a lot of challenges, and even though it was very difficult for me to say, Superintendent, board, we really do need to close our doors for a week, I do think our teachers at that time just absolutely needed that break to kind of breathe again. And I don't know what the best answer is for teachers, because that planning is a monstrous beast. It just is a lot that we are asking.
Thank you. Ms. Ross, what is your strongest recommendation as we look to the future with COVID being part of what we face in making determinations about safely reopening our schools?
I think one area that I have been thinking about and talking about a lot is testing. And I think that maybe there's some plans in postponing testing again this year, standardized tests. And I think those are the decisions that really take the pressure off of the teachers. And I don't have to worry about it as much because I'm high school, but the elementary teachers are really focused on that. And they already are really focusing on the learning of students. I have 2 kids in elementary school who are at home but doing remote learning. And the teachers are doing the right things, but it's just an extra burden during this time. When you have, I mean, we've had kids that have been quarantined for a month total, that have been out of school or more. So it's just too much. We just need to streamline things and focus on what's important so we can actually do the important learning. So that would be that's the one thing that I'm trying to tell everybody. And then I think we also students need access to mental health services. I don't like that barrier of the paywall. So those are my 2 things.
Thank you. Mr. Fosbender, athletics and various co-curricular activities have been a big part of your children's lives, as you told us in your opening. Your oldest daughter, an exceptional student, flutist and cheerleader, your oldest son in football and track, and your third daughter, a top track athlete. How has the impact of school models affected your kids' activity and extracurricular activities? And what has been the impact on parental access to watching your kids compete in pursuit of their passions?
So my sophomore goes to high school in East Helena, and the administration out there has been outstanding. They've really pushed the limits every time they can. Our health officer here, I think, has been a little overly restrictive. There's ways to allow parents to participate in the extracurricular activities and still maintain social distancing. And it was a struggle to get plans approved with her. East Helena did a great job. Now we're back down to 1 parent per participant, which I think is, again, ridiculous. We're hoping we can get past that, because I think it's important to have parents in the stands, whether it's cheerleaders or band members or athletes or just any of the extracurricular. The in-class stuff is, I'm a big fan. I mean, we push our kids. My kids have all been straight A students. My sophomore in Bozeman made the president's list this last semester during this time. I mean, it was tough for her, but I just asked her, I said, what was the hardest thing? She said not having access to that in-class learning. But she said some of her classes, they said they'd limit, 30 kids can go Monday, 30 Wednesday. So she'd just show up every day, and if kids didn't show up, she got to participate in class. But the extracurricular for the mental well-being of the kids, I think it's a big aspect that we need to make sure and focus on and make sure we're doing that too. East Helena is doing a block class, which I think has worked very well. The kids do 1 class all week. So you limit the exposure to how many kids they will see each week. So if they have someone test positive, there's a limited number of kids. They don't have to shut the whole school down. They can just shut down that block. So I think it's something that the rest of the school system should look at, because I think it's been pretty successful. I've had a lot of parents call me from the Helena school system with honor roll students, athletes that want to drop out of school. They said their kids have just had it because the mixture of in class, not in class, a lot of the online stuff they said isn't working. The kids will submit their homework and it doesn't get accepted. There's glitches with the software, whatever. So the parents I'm talking to, the Helena model isn't working. East Helena, I think, is working pretty well.
Thank you. Ms. Rasmussen, what current flexibilities in the law have been implemented in your district, and how are those flexibilities helping student learning in Bainville? You're still muted, Renee.
Perhaps the biggest one I would say would have to be the flexibility we have to talk about proficiency. And to be honest, we talk about that a lot, mostly in respect to individual students. We just raised that with a student today who has been doing mostly off-site learning and has completely completed all of the curriculum for the grade at the half year. And we're talking about not wanting that child to slide backwards and wanting them to keep proficient, but what that will look like, as we move along. We've looked at that with high school students as well, especially as they move from in class to out of class. We're calling it on-site and off-site learning. We've looked at those things. So that's probably one of the biggest thing. At last spring, the ability to use our school buses to deliver meals and to deliver textbooks or whatever was necessary, that was phenomenal. We also used that time to address some of that social emotional connection that we were very worried about, in that we had staff members mask up and ride with the bus drivers, so the kids got to, and we did different ones all the time, so the kids would get to wave and see teachers and still feel connected. And so I think that those two things were really important for us. As we move back into this year, some of the flexibilities that we've used, we've adjusted our calendar a couple of times, just because, when we set our calendar back in February, we didn't know that we were going to need to have a 2-hour window for lunch instead of a 1-hour window for lunch. So we've used a lot of that aggregate hours to really meet the kids' needs and meet the needs of our staff.
Thank you. Ms. Zahara Harris, what are some of the successes that you're experiencing during this pandemic?
We've actually had a lot of successes, and that comes from our community support, our board support, our superintendent and curriculum director and special services directors really looking to the future. And one of our first successes was we were able to collaborate on a model to hold an in-person graduation successfully last spring. That was the one promise I made to our kids, to try to have some sense of normalcy to the end of the class of 2020. And just developing a model that others were able to replicate and utilize for their own purposes was a great success. Moving into this year, we had started some initiatives, not knowing about the pandemic, to move to a block schedule. We had started initiatives 3 years ago to do a one-to-one initiative with Chromebooks. And this year was the year we were implementing those. So our teachers had a year of prep work with the block schedule. So they learned how to plan in the block. They learned those methodologies and approaches, whereas some other teachers had that just put on their plate the second day of school to figure out. And we felt bad for them. But that was a huge success. If we didn't have our block schedule right now, I don't think we could have stayed open as much as we are, simply because with 700 kids in our building, we basically weed out about 200 of those every morning and every afternoon, depending on the schedule. We have flexibility with our study halls. So we're kind of running more of a college schedule here. And the reason we put that block schedule into play was to decrease the amount of stress our students were feeling. And really, with this pandemic, by doing that, we had a double benefit for our kids. Additionally, we were able to add some more mental health services to our campus through a social worker that now is here 3 days a week that we didn't have before. Her plate's full. We have a need for an additional full-time social worker if there were the funds to add that. However, we allow flexibility for students to reach out and utilize services that might be in the community to provide that support, and we really encourage it. I think the other positive that's really come out of this is everyone's really learned how flexible they truly are. They understand that being flexible is not a negative stigma, that the best laid plans at a moment's notice can change, and we can change them effectively in the best interest of our kids. And I think that's the biggest piece of it, that it's okay to tell parents and our students, in person isn't going to work for your family right now. That's okay. So let's look at the plan for remote. Do we want that to be a shorter time, a longer time? How can we make that work best? And I think for our parents, that really has helped them be able to plan according to what they need for their families. Streamlining the curriculum. I've heard a couple of you talk about that. Our curriculum director, Charlotte, right at the beginning of this, told our staffs across the board, we are not teaching as much as we have in the past. We're finding and prioritizing what's most important, and we're going to focus on that, and we're going to pare it down during this pandemic so the kids get what they absolutely need to meet the standards and to prove they know the material, and we're not going to overwhelm them. Because I think that's the one thing we all lose when we start working with remote students and online learning. We don't realize the amount of work that maybe my teaching partner over here is giving to a student, and this partner, and then that poor kid is at home. And I have a senior right now, and I saw it right in the beginning. And that it was a benefit because I could say something to my staff and say, pay attention. Do you realize this is what's going on? And people started talking. I think the other thing that was really successful in the very beginning, I know this is a small thing. My district gave us cell phones as administrators for the first time in a long time. I used that cell phone so that I could sit at home at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night when this pandemic first started and thinking about coming back to school, to have conversations with parents because they needed to hear it. They needed to know someone was listening to, I'm not sure I should send my kids, or I want to send my kids, but I'm not sure what that looks like. And for me not have to sit in this building 15, 16, 18 hours to be able to have those conversations was super beneficial. But giving the flexibility to not only our staff to have those conversations, but across the district, I think has been super, super beneficial. There's a lot of things that I could talk about positive wise that Laurel High School and Laurel School District as a whole have been able to do, but transportation, student services, all of it, the lunch program. If OPI hadn't made some adjustments to the lunch program, we would have had a lot of kids going without food, and we are very appreciative that everyone looked at all of those elements so we could still serve our kids.
Thank you. Ms. Ross, I know you're on a short timeline with us to get back to class, so here's your last question if you have to leave. COVID has impacted every community and its residents. What would you like to share with our state about this time in which we live, the learning that is occurring by students, and any other insights on being not only a teacher today, but Montana's Teacher of the Year today?
The bell just rang, so it's going to be kind of loud, but I'll just say really quick again that we need training in social emotional learning as teachers. I need to know what to do in the classroom, what activities to do, how to do it, how to know the signs that a student needs help, how to talk to them, how to form rapport and relationships. That's the kind of training we need now. We got a lot on online learning and switching to remote, but we really need to hunker down on that, and we need that for the long term. Like we've always needed that. We just really need it now. So I gotta go. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fosbender, overall, what impact, if any, has safely reopening schools had on the overall social, emotional, and mental well-being of your children?
They're doing much better this year as opposed to last year when it was just a complete shutdown. But of course, they're still struggling. She's in the Spirit of the West marching band, and they obviously haven't got to play for anything. They put together a ballad that they did that was and put on YouTube that was nice. But yeah, it's just, we've got to figure out how to get back to normal, because we're really, I think we're failing our kids. You know, not to place blame, because we had a pandemic dumped in our laps, and you know, the teachers, the parents, everyone is having to deal with it in different aspects of it. So I don't know what the answers are, but we've just got to focus on the kids. The one thing I would say, you know, like Abby, I'm sure she's an outstanding student. You hear from the good parents that are concerned, who are falling through the cracks, are the kids who don't have that good parental support at home. We need to make sure that we catch those kids and keep them from, you know, the good parents are going to keep pushing their kids. The other kids that don't have that parental guidance at home. And I don't know what the answer is to that either, but we just really need to keep aware of where those kids are. My brother moved to Vegas last year, and he said in the school system there, when they shut down in March, they completely lost track of 1/3 of the kids, over 100,000 kids. They couldn't catch on a cell phone, couldn't get an email. They were just off the radar. So I think we've done a much better job here in Montana, but I still think we've got to do everything we can to try and support these kids. And I appreciate all of you guys for the professions you've chosen and for what you're doing for our kids. I think it's outstanding. So hopefully we can keep it up.
Thank you, Mike. Abby, rumor has it that you are a very capable self-directed learner and that you have specific interests. So when you take into account the ability of today's students to learn and tomorrow's leaders, what is your vision about what school should look like for your future, and how can we help?
So my vision for my school, for my future, is the ability for me to work at my own pace. I want the teachers to have the curriculum, and right now they do. They have the full curriculum, but with all the uncertainty and overwhelming, we've reverted back to traditional learning, which is very hard for me because I tend to, it doesn't take as long for me to learn something and catch on as others. And I really need something else to work on while I'm waiting for my peers to catch up to where I'm at. And right now I don't have that. And flexibility is crucial. That's the thing right there. And I need rural high-speed internet is fundamental for my education, and especially now when it's back and forth from in-person and remote learning. And when my teachers need to teach remotely, it would be great if they could use all the different learning styles: vision, audio, hands-on, rhythm, etc. And how you can help: rural high-speed internet and teacher training on self-paced curriculum, plan for remote in-person transitions, and develop plans and practices, and help the teachers help the students. For me, that is my vision, and that's how I think you can help.
Thank you, Abby. Superintendent Rasmussen, when we started this call, you announced your retirement. What is the #1 piece of advice you would offer to other superintendents, parents, community members, and students around safely reopening our Montana schools?
I guess I really want to talk about our educational staff. They have been phenomenal. I sit here in a small school in Eastern Montana, and I look at them handle on-site and off-site learning, with kids moving in and out of that fluidly, plus maybe the kid who's gone on vacation. And I watch them, and their workload has more than doubled and more than tripled, because not only are they doing both of those at the same time, but they're also having to create more effective ways to do that. And I've watched them grow while I've been in the classroom observing them, and to see what they're finding things that work and don't work. And it's been phenomenal. But as I see them as Frodo Baggins would say, stretched thin. I feel thin. Today, somebody came up to me and said, I I feel mentally fatigued. I think that's that social emotional component. And we're not talking about the kids, we're talking about my staff. You know, I look at Shawnda here, and I know good and well that you feel that. You know, I know good and well you feel it. You're talking about your staff, but I know you feel it as well. And that's my job, is to say, we're not doing the best. And what do? I mean, you know, there's limited amount of things that we can do, but we're going to have to look at that, because I'm afraid I see teachers that routinely take on more than they should all the time, and just do that and handle it with no problems. And I see them burning out. I see them being tired. I see them being short. And that's not something I ever expected to see from them. And so I know that what we're doing is taking its toll, and we need to find a way to address that.
Thank you. Ms. Zahara Harris, when you look back at the previous school year and forward into the 2021-22 school year, what will you be doing differently to ensure equitable opportunities to learn for all of your students?
When I look at all of the big picture, I really do believe that our staff embraced that wraparound model a long time ago of taking care of that whole child. And I think that continuing the blended model for students and finding an effective approach with that is important to keep. It's something we have done during my 5 years here at Laurel. And Abby talked about some of that self-paced learning and going, that's what a blended model helps us be able to do, is keep kids engaged, keep the relevance for our public education opportunities and our other educational opportunities where they're doing some work studies or they're out in the work world, because that's the part that we didn't talk about. A lot of kids either were forced or chose to say goodbye to public education and just go straight into the work world because out of necessity during this pandemic or whatever the reasons might be. And that's a concern to me that will be a long-term effect that we're going to have to work with in society. I do have a concern about that. I think really engaging parents and students early on is something that we can do a better job of. And it's something we learned how to do even better during this pandemic, and moving forward that we need to improve on even more so. I know our staff, they weren't used to necessarily letting parents in on the Google Classroom platform, but when they discovered that, then parents were more actively engaged, even more so than having access to their Infinite Campus portal where the grades were. They actually could see what the assignments look like. And I think that's important to give to parents, and we want to continue that. I think we need to continue to have some policy flexibility going forward to help implement things that, for us in particular, tech-related items. There's a newfangled tech tool out there. Maybe it's a piece of software or it's a website. Having the ability to utilize that more quickly would be great. Kids come to us all the time. Hey, did you know that this was out there and this would really help me be able to do papers or presentations? And then it takes us months to go through the process to get that approved to be able to use it. And that's the frustrating part, I think, for our teachers, because they know some of these things and they've used them in the past, and it's really been tightened down in the last year and a half on using that. So that's one thing. Also, bringing back some of those interventions that used to work really well with kids. We have to find the models that worked. We have to put them back into place. When we brought our block schedule in, which we will be keeping, we did away with what we called our STEAM period, which was kind of an intervention period right before lunch that helped kids with some advisory stuff, some career stuff, as well as interventions. And we need that back. And so I think this has helped us discover like where we need to put our money and our resources, and where maybe we can let go of some things. And the other piece of it, and the kids here at Laurel High School know this about me. I'm going to do everything possible to keep things as normal as possible for our kids, keep them actively engaged. I'm currently out there trying to figure out how to get an esports program for that 60 some kids who aren't involved in some kind of sports. I do not play video games, but I am learning. And it's because there's a group of kids out there who said, can you do something for us so we can feel an active part of our school? Thank you for that.
Thank you. Mr. Fosbender, as a parent with students in all levels of both secondary and post-secondary school, what final comments would you like to share with us today that we have not asked you?
I guess, so in nature, when a herd is threatened, they protect their young. And this virus poses almost zero risk to our kids. So the ones at risk are the teachers, the superintendents, the administrators. We've got to protect them, but at the same time, we've got to protect those kids. We've got to get back to normal. Like I said, East Helena has a 100% in-class learning. And I think it's working very well for the kids. My daughter, I've said a few times, she loves it. She doesn't love it. Nobody loves what's going on, but she likes it. It's better than what her friends in Helena, talking to them, what they're having to deal with. So I think if we can figure out a way to get as much in class for those students as we can, I think that's the number one priority, just for educating them, for their mental health, just all aspects of it. I think we need to get the kids back. And I also I think there needs to be more focus on getting parents, grandparents, family in the stands at the extracurricular activities. We've got some health officers in the state that don't agree with me on that. And I think we really need to lobby them so that they know how important that is to the mental health aspect for our kids too. But thanks for having this panel. I think we just have to keep having discussions. I mean, we're learning as we go. So everybody's doing the best we can. We just have to keep plugging away. So thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Abby, I think we can all agree you are a remarkable young lady. What would you like people to know that we haven't asked you, but what, in your opinion, is very important to Montana students returning to normal?
It is very important for me to have my ability to work in my own pace. And Conrad has experimented with self-paced learning, and that really helped me. And I know it helped a lot of my fellow students. And I really think that it would be great if you could keep supporting flexibility in every aspect of learning. And thank you so much for having this panel. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Abby. Superintendent Arntzen.
Wow, I'm very humbled by all the feelings and thoughts and very, very well thought out discussion today. This is a puzzle, but we all fit together so well, from the parent standpoint, from school administrators, from principal, as well as from parent. And we're all focusing on prioritizing what's best for our children. So I am just excited that we had this initial conversation. We'll have more. And I thank you for all that you're doing. You are putting our students first. And I appreciate the thought on the well-being of our children, the well-being of our teachers, the well-being of our families, and most importantly, the health and welfare of our great state. So with that, it is a new year. Let's bring newness into this, and let's all get back to learning. Thank you all very well. Please stay well. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for your time today.